second to go for the win. He got it. The Cougars win it. Number one remains number one. Cougars reset. Jackson again finds it. And the Houston Cougars go from the first four out to the Sweet 16.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby.
Yes! Welcome to the Scott Horn Podcast back here on a Wednesday night where I don't want to boil what we're going to talk to tonight down to just two events of one sport when we're going to be talking about multiple sports, and where I think we pride ourselves in the show of being people who really consume the whole hog that is, or I guess it wouldn't be politically correct to say the whole cat, Dustin. We don't eat cats of any variety in this country, but to get someone who I think has been a fan of this university's athletics for almost 20 years, to think tonight that we're going to be talking, Dustin, about beating the Longhorns in men's basketball and on the verge of facing the Kansas Jayhawks in men's basketball. Again, only two events that we're going to talk about. I have many in this episode tonight coming and have been just completed, but that it just feels so surreal, man. Like we have been fans of this program when such a weekly offer, I think, would have been something like our wildest fever dreams, right?
Oh, for sure.
So, Dustin, How are you doing, friend?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. I made the semi-foolish decision to drive up to Austin.
It's a weird way of saying great decision, bud, but understand.
It was a great decision because we won, and the adrenaline carried me all the way back to Houston, and I got in at 1 in the morning when I was able to take a half day at work the next day. So it ended up being a great decision. Had we lost, and I had been struggling through that drive on the way home, trying to stay awake, without all of that post-win adrenaline, probably would have been ruining my decision a little bit more. But hey, it's the one and only time I'm fairly certain we'll ever get to play at the Moody Center. So glad to have gotten that win, and excited to be seeing you this weekend in Lawrence for genuinely, it's for years we've been talking, when it was just Houston to the Big 12 was a rumor or something that seemed unlikely. That was one of those things that we've talked about a million times. Like, oh man, if we ever ended up, even if the Big 12 fell apart, if Kansas is still there, you get to go play games at Allen Fieldhouse. Like, how cool would that be? And here we are in the Big 12 in first place and about to go play Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse. Doesn't get a whole lot better than that.
Yeah, no exaggeration. A game I think that's been many years in the theoretical, like, ooh, that would be fun if it happened. And I would say probably for you and I both, almost 2.5 of from the time of the Big 12 invite becoming official to now, that you and I in some form or fashion, I'm not in your head, but I know you, like me, have quite often thought about, okay, like, here's what I'm going to do to make sure everything is out of the way so I am at Phog Allen Fieldhouse, like you and I will be in a few days. So, yeah, obviously very excited about that. Excited, of course, to tell you folks listening and or watching us about our good friends at the 1012 Network. Please subscribe to them at TN12 Network, wherever you social media, as well as subscribing to the 1012 Podcast, wherever you put podcasts in your ears, and a number of great sister Big 12 podcasts as well. Please don't forget, if you don't do so already, and if you do, thank you. You're an absolute saint. You're a wonderful person for supporting the show at patreon.com/shpodcast for as little as 16 cents a day. You can support what we do here at the show, weekly independent Houston Cougar sports podcast. Of course, going to mention our friends Charlie Hustle, charliehustle.com, makers of incredibly comfortable vintage sports wearables, many great collegiate varieties there. Most of the Big 12, including your Houston Cougars, a recent Houston Cougar collection refresh, some really awesome Cougar Hoops tees as well. I could not be there with Dustin in Austin watching a fantastic Cougar win, but I did the next best thing, which is exercise and wear the Charlie Hustle red Cougar basketball tee while I did mediocrely at Racket Sports. But
I'll just jump in real quick. I was also wearing my brand new, recently shipped to me, red Charlie Hustle Cougar tee. Like, the first game it's been to, so clearly good juju in that shirt is all I'm saying.
Yeah, we are a lifetime undefeated while in our respective locations, wearing two different tees from the fantastic Charlie Hustle Cougar basketball refresh. It's charliehustle.com. And of course, like I always say, don't forget to use our promo code SHP15. That's going to save you 15% on any order of incredibly comfortable vintage Charlie Hustle wearables. Obviously, like we talked about at the top, a lot of Cougar men's basketball stuff to talk about tonight, but we had a little news item today. That's a little news item today that we felt merited mentioning at the top here. We're certainly hoping that the coach carousel, the departures certainly had slowed down for the Cougs. Unfortunately, not the case as this late morning. It was reported, I believe, first by Matt Zenitz at 247 that Cougar defensive line coach Brian Early would no longer be the Cougar defensive line coach, would be accepting the same position at the University of Missouri. Timing kind of sucks. Don't love that, but I think as much as some percentage of the Cougar fan base, I think seems kind of surprised. I mean, it's an SEC program coming off its best season in a long time, and also one that seems to have figured out the best way to combine NAL and traditional recruiting efforts. Like, seems to be that program's at a high point. It's, I think, kind of unrealistic to expect one of your position coaches to turn down a job with an SEC staff that seems to be doing pretty well, Dustin, but obviously disappointed to see Brian Early go because he's someone who's done quite well in his role since 2019 with the Cougs.
Yeah, it's definitely disappointing. It's disappointing because he's a coach who is, like you said, done a good job coaching up that defensive line, and certainly helped the Cougs put some guys in the pros on the defensive line in recent years. And that was the whole drama of is he staying, is he not staying, are they going to offer him a contract, are they not going to offer him a contract? It seemed like that had come down in our favor, and then of course when you least expect it is when those things can happen. But yeah, I mean, also, like, it's a bummer because, with it coming this late in the cycle, it is, there's guys that maybe, obviously some coaches are willing to leave late in the cycle. Brian Early just did, but, it's probably a little bit harder to land the guy you want at this point in the cycle when he's likely, getting ready, preparing for the season with whatever team he's likely already on at this point. So definitely going to be a challenge for Willie Fritz, and we'll see what he does in terms of bringing in a replacement for Brian Early. If maybe he's got some I don't know if there's another staffer on there that might get bumped up for a season or something like that, or if they're going to go outside to find somebody. We'll certainly see. But it is what it is. That's life in college football. Like you said, if this was 2 or 3 years ago, even appreciating that Missouri is an SEC job, I think I might have been like a little bit like, what, really? Like, oh, come on. Like, you're willing to leave us, like out of cycle, like, and but for Missouri, like for Missouri. But like you said, they are a program that certainly seems to be trending in the right direction. Seems to be trending on to bigger and better things. SEC job, that's the way that the financials of the sport already are. That's the way that the financials of the sport are continuing to go, is that there are just two conferences that have, so much more money and so much more exposure and so much access to the elite recruits than everybody else that it's just hard to blame anyone for turning down any of those offers, especially if it's a program that looks newly like it's probably going to be in the top half of one of those conferences, more than likely than not going forward. So, and just broadly, I think, we're happy for Brian Early to have had the time that he did at U of H. I think, we both, broadly speaking, try not to badmouth people, making career decisions that they feel are in their own best interest. But, I will say in moments like this, I do like to remind people that, if you're ever tempted to moralize against athletes in the transfer portal making decisions that they feel are in their own best interest, please remember that the grown-ups in the room have much more freedom than do the student athletes to move between schools, and they are not shy about exercising that freedom. So, worth keeping that in mind. But other than that, yeah, just like I said, a little bit, maybe more than a little bit disappointed to see Brian Early move on. It certainly felt like the program was kind of getting like I said, the transfers out had kind of come to a stop, and the transfers in were kind of still trickling in, so it just felt like we're in this cycle of good news without any corresponding bad news. But this one definitely is it can't last forever. This one definitely lands in the bad news column.
Yeah, I think as a Cougar fan, you always need to be guarding for the bad news. You should never ever feel too untouchable as well. And yeah, I'm glad you said that at the end there. I think fully echoing what you said. Just remember that the athletes aren't the first group of people to make decisions in their own interest too. That's been happening for a long, long time with the guys who coach and even the people who supervise the coaches in this specific realm of sport. Dustin, you want to talk about something a little more pleasant in a 2-0 week from Cougar men's basketball?
I surely do. I'm very excited to talk about both of these games. They both were tremendously fun in their own right. And it was kind of funny through the first 6 games, 3 home and 3 road. The trend was Houston blows out teams at home and they get in real close games on the road. And that trend continued, as that's what we got 2 more of with our 2 respective games from the past week, which, I mean, let's stop and appreciate that for a minute, because literally in 8 out of 8 Big 12 games, I think Houston has done everything you can ask of them. Like, if you win by a bunch at home, like, that's all you can ask of somebody. If you play a Big 12 road game again, especially against the kind of teams that Houston has played on the road, and you play it and you keep that game close and make it kind of a coin flip down the stretch, that's all you can ask. And you know what? If you win all your home games and you win half of your road games every Big 12 season, you're going to be a 1 seed in the tournament every year. So, in terms of the first 8 games of Houston's schedule, can't be mad about really any of it, and certainly can't be mad about their win over Kansas State on Saturday, 74-52. I think we both expected the Cougars to win this one. I certainly hoped Houston would win this one in a way that wasn't super close down the stretch, but definitely didn't expect Houston to outplay K-State to this extent. The game was literally never close. Yeah. Houston jumped out to an 11-0 lead to start the game. K-State answered with a 7-2 run. Houston answered that with a 16-5 run to push the lead to 17, and it never got back within single digits. The game was over as soon as it started. Houston was up 20 at the half and just nursed the game the entire second half, led by as many as 29, ended up winning by 22. And yeah, like I said, that's 4 blowouts and 4 Big 12 home games for Houston, and 3 of those 4 came against teams that I think were at least pretty good. K-State maybe pushing that. They followed this one up by losing at home to Oklahoma by 20. So that program maybe kind of falling apart before our eyes. So I think that's maybe some context that you would throw onto this one, that it looks like K-State is kind of, the wheels are coming off a little bit for the Wildcats. But I think even with that, taking that into consideration, Sam, I'm just never going to not be happy when Houston vaporizes a Big 12 opponent.
Yeah, I think the West Virginia game in the latter stages, like the second half, that one got less competitive than this one. But in terms of the start, like West Virginia was at least like hanging around for 11, 12-ish minutes of the first half of that game. I think, like you said, K-State hung around for precisely 0 minutes of this game. I tried to really, as a mental exercise to myself, when I was doing my notes, think about like, okay, was there any point in this game where K-State could have just gotten their foot back in the door and maybe made this game a contest? And there was, I think it was like, they were down 32-21 in the latter stages within, I think, 5 minutes to go in the first half. And then promptly U of H hit back-to-back threes. And it's just like, nope, this is not going to be a game where you sweat it even remotely. And like you, I think, even though K-State doesn't look like a team that's trending up right now, again, this is still a team that's still consistently far better than the majority of the conference opponents that we saw before. I think that is also some larger context there that, yes, K-State doesn't look great right now. K-State almost certainly would have been a top 3 or top 4 American program like these past several years, the equivalent of, if not even better there. And that the Cougs, again, allowed this to be a game for precisely 0 seconds, I think. Quite impressive. Like Tyler Perry, I make an effort, unless I'm trying to do something related to like a tweet or something like that, not to look at the box score during a game, just because I like to sort of be surprised by, okay, again, biggest dork shit, you're smiling because it's the biggest dork shit ever. And it's something I think like you could probably find at least relatable, if not something you practice in real life. And I knew Tyler Perry hadn't had a good game in this. So I knew Tyler Perry hadn't done much offensively. And even I was still shocked when I was like, wow, 3 points and 1 for 5. Dustin, I went back and looked at his entire career game log on KenPom. That's tied for the worst of his career, and he hasn't had any points output this low since the early stages of his first year at North Texas, which was the 2021-22 season. Like that's I mean, Tyler Perry, I don't think has had the same impact, or maybe even like the expected level of impact coming out of North Texas to K-State as you would have thought maybe in the summer when he was kind of a big splashy transfer commit. But what you saw on Saturday, what he did for TS Center is far below his usual output. The Cougs absolutely put the clamps on him. And Arthur Kaluma as well. Arthur Kaluma did more offensively, but turned the ball over a ton, never seemed to be able to consistently impact this game. Really, the only guy on K-State who was able to do anything in terms of occasionally creating a positive impact was, I think, Cam Carter, who hit some, I think, nice, difficult shots. I gained, I would say, I was already a Cam Carter appreciator, I would say, from watching the Cats a couple times prior this year, but gained, I think, a little bit of appreciation for how well the guy played in a not so terrific effort for them. It just thoroughly dominating for the Cougs. I thought you can only tell so much from watching on TV, but I was pleasantly surprised. I'm sorry if that's damning with faint praise. I was pleasantly surprised how good the crowd was for 11 a.m. Central Time for that game. I thought they made a nice positive impact to the Cougs kind of pulling away early. That was just some random little thing I noticed.
Yeah, you mentioned the defensive performance that Houston put up on Tyler Perry and on the Kansas State team more broadly as well. And that was definitely the thing that jumped out for me, as much as, one is just how quickly the game was over, and B is just, another ho-hum, just like incredibly smothering, just like putting up historical defensive performance, holding Perry to, like you said, the lowest since his freshman year or whatever. And really, it was another example. I don't know if it's necessarily the quintessential example. But I realized after this game, I was like, you know what? Houston is not in the discussion for best defensive team in the country this year. They are the best defensive team in the country this year. There's not a discussion. They are in a discussion for best defensive team of this century is what they are. In terms of coaching eyeballs, you heard Jerome Tang say after this game, he said Houston might be the best defensive team he's ever seen. And in terms of the metrics, Ken Palm's database goes back to 1999. Houston has, at last check, it was like the fifth best defensive rating in terms of, points allowed per possession, adjusted for quality of opponents. And this season, college basketball as a whole is on pace to have its highest scoring season since, in terms of points per possession, also since 1999. So in Houston is putting up historically good defensive numbers in a historically high scoring season. It's kind of genuinely difficult to overstate what they're doing on the defensive end, and watching them just smother, Tyler Perry and just kind of like, hold a guy game of his college career since he'd kind of, figured out who he was as a player. I mean, it's just like, and it's like not going to register as one of like the top 10, maybe like best defensive performances of the last couple of years. Like, that's how good this team is. They're just kind of doing things that remarkable defensively just as a matter of routine.
Yeah. I also thought Jamal Shedd's 17-point performance, speaking of routine, felt almost routine after the just heroics we've seen from the guy this year. It's like, oh yeah, no, he just had 17 points. He just completely locked down Tyler Perry. I mean, not the last time you and I on this show are going to talk about Jamal Shedd recent basketball heroics, but not like a humdrum. Humdrum is like negative. I'm trying to think of the best descriptor for it. The workmanlike way he put that up, I think just really impressive. And it's kind of insane that you've had this run from about 20, what was it, Galen took over the job in, 2015, 2016, that the entire time we had done this podcast, Dustin, it's either been Galen Robinson, at the time winningest player of all time, just like ultimate Samson culture guy, all that stuff. Dejan Jarreau, unbelievably electric player, guy who was, just the leader of the first Final Four team since Phi Slama Jama, and now Jamal Shedd. Like, to have that, it's absurd. I think we all need to take a step back and be like, wow, we are just unbelievably fortunate to have had this succession of guys in this program. It's really incredible. Also, Damian Dunn, he's, I think, been a nice little development in Big 12 play coming off the bench. He really just seemed like early on in the season, at least offensively, he was kind of struggling to find his role in the team, struggling to find his shot, his rhythm, all of that kind of coming together at once after being with the Temple program for such a long time. And I feel like he's starting to figure out his role now. Like, is he consistently going to be a 12, 13 points a game guy? Not sure about that, but I think he can consistently give you the kind of performance he gave you on Saturday against K-State, and that's just going to make this very good, hard to beat team even harder to beat.
The Cougars, as you probably know by now, if you're listening to this podcast, followed up that win over Kansas State on Monday with a overtime road win over the Longhorns.
Yes.
76-72. Cougs led by as many as 12 in the first half, felt comfortably the better team in the first half. I remember the specific moment at the game, going into halftime up 8, looking at the scoreboard and going, wow, that's awesome. Like, we're playing great. We're probably unlucky to only be up 8. And then immediately that optimism turning into a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach and going, oh crap, we outplayed them for most of the first half and we're only up 8. They're one small run away from being right back in this game. And they're too talented of a team to not expect them to make a run at some point. And sure enough, the Longhorns did rally, tied the game up, took the lead with 10 minutes and change left in regulation, pushed that lead to 6 points with 8 minutes and change, prompting Kelvin Sampson to call a timeout. And I remember at that point, Houston just looked gassed. I remember suddenly we were thinking about, oh yeah, like they had one day off and then they had to go like travel on the road. They're running a shorter rotation. I think they got like 4 minutes each for Ramon Walker and Malik Wilson on this one. But you're running basically a 7-man rotation with Arsenault out. And I remember that moment just kind of making peace with like, all right, you know what? I think we're probably going to lose this game. I love this team. I think believe this team has an infinite ceiling, but this looks like this one might be a little bit too much to try it. I don't know if we have enough gas in the tank to pull this one out. But the Cougars struck right back out of the timeout off of a missed shot. JoJo Tugler made a fantastic play to tip an offensive rebound to LJ Cryer, who swung it to Jamal Shedd for a 3. On the other end, Tugler then blocked Dylan Disu's shot, leading to a fast break and another three for Shed, who looked over and did a stare down and a head nod at the UT bench, which, yeah, if you couldn't love Jamal Shed anymore, then you already did. And then on the other following Longhorn possession, Weaver misses a wide open three. And who else but JoJo Tugler makes a great play to control the defensive rebound. And this time it's Emmanuel Sharp who hits a three for Houston. Suddenly your 6-point deficit becomes a 3-point lead on 3 threes. And this, even though it's 3 3-pointers and the guards hit these, like I said, freshman JoJo Tugler was involved in all three of those plays. He got the offensive rebound on the first one, got the block that led to the fast break for the second one. And like I said, got a great defensive rebound to get the third one going. So, great moment, but the Longhorns kept coming. They retook a 4-point lead with just over 2 minutes to go. That's when Jamal Shed got in the lane for a bucket, and then Javier Francis hit 2 massive free throws on the ensuing possession to tie it up. And then
you probably heard me exhaling all the way from Vegas after.
Oh my goodness, I couldn't.
I would, yeah.
I was at the game just under my breath, just like, Javier, for the love of God, just if you ever had a chance to just like make 2 free throws in your life, like now is the moment. And huge clutch free throws for Javier there. But yeah, Ace missed a couple free throws on the other end, retakes the lead, Wani Roberts gets a bucket to tie it back up, and then had a big block in the closing seconds to kind of, on the closing minute to ensure that the game stayed tied and ultimately went to overtime, 65 all. Big moment, 2 minutes left in overtime. Javier Francis fouls out, so the freshman Tugler comes back on, quickly has a putback dunk that should go on the forever highlight reel to put Houston up by 3. But on the other end, Longhorns get kind of a suspect 3-point play for Ace Smith to tie it back up. And then with the ball in their possession, tie game, overtime, less than a minute to go. Who else but JoJo Tugler, the freshman, grabs a huge offensive rebound. The ball eventually makes it to Wani, who gets the bucket to give Houston the lead. Wani also then followed it up by blocking Ace Smith's shot on the next UT possession. The Longhorns then have to foul. Emmanuel Sharp hits 4 huge free throws down the stretch. And Houston clinches the win and gets out of Austin with a W. And yeah, I mean, just like you probably know from the way I described the game, but just unbelievable gutsy performance by the Cougars, playing on the road, 1 day of rest on a court that was incredibly slick. You saw both teams just sliding all over the place, constantly people coming out and trying to wipe it up and keep it dry. Just hard court to play on in an already hard situation. You had the big lead, you gave it up, had to rally from multiple deficits in the closing minutes. You really just can't say enough about what an impressive performance this was from Houston. And yes, Jamal Shed he's your player of the game here. Another incredible game and a homecoming game for him. But man, just listening to the recap of the big moments of the game, just how many plays Houston got and needed from everybody in this one. Cryer didn't have his best shooting game, but made big plays when needed. Sharp, hit some huge threes, hit the clinching free throws. Your bigs, man, it seemed like all game, every time Houston would try to like drop one off to their big, it just got like fumbled and it was a little frustrating. But when rubber hits the road, all 3 of Wani, Javier, and JoJo made big play after big play after big play down the stretch and in overtime to make sure that Houston got this win. So just incredibly exciting win. It's the one chance you'll probably ever get to play a regular season game in Austin, Sam. And just loved not only that Houston won this game, but the way that they won this game, just getting lots of big performances from everybody.
It was a real toughest team win scenario because, like you said, this was U of H kind of looked gassed. Maybe gassed isn't the right word exactly, but looked like the more tired of the 2 teams in the second half. But every time, to use the boxing metaphor, they looked kind of wobbly on their feet, they had an answer. Like UT got it out to that 6-point lead, like you were talking about. U of H immediately goes back and gets all those threes to get back in this game. That every time UT looked like they had this Cougar team the ropes, this Cougar team had an answer. Like, it wasn't always easy, it wasn't always pretty, but they're never going to be easy or pretty in this conference. Spoiler alert, like, you'll be very lucky if you have one road game a year where the team is so bad it's like, yeah, you probably win that one. Looking at you, Oklahoma State, if you're on next year's schedule.
I was gonna say, we didn't get West Virginia or Oklahoma State away this
exactly
year. You don't really get those.
Yeah, certainly not getting them this year. Even though UCF looked like that in the preseason, certainly does not look like that kind of team now. So I think, yes, there are things that could have theoretically been better from this game, but that's literally every road game. Like, every road game is a street fight, like Kellen Sampson, I think, likes to tweet before every road game. And it's true, but I think really 2 quantifiable aspects of this, like that you outlast this team in overtime. And to be fair, UT also played last Saturday, they played in Provo, and BYU plays a very frenetic style that's going to wear you down a bit. But you saw U of H win this game by being the tougher team late, by digging deep late. And you get seeing the Allen Bishop like strength program kind of bear fruits in on-court ways that maybe, even though his training doesn't specifically involve basketball skill, there's a basketball skill to have guys like Jamal Shed playing 40 plus minutes. Like Wani Roberts, Dustin played 39 minutes on Monday. Can you imagine 3 years ago, like when he was, kind of your eighth or ninth guy, like a bench rotation guy, Wani Roberts was like 39 minutes. I'd be like, well, he seems like a good offensive rebounder, last spring, but God help us all if he's playing 39 minutes and without fouling out. And Javier even being like, I know he finally fouled out in a game. I think we kind of jinxed it on the show here a little bit, but that he still gave you as many minutes as he did before fouling out. And that JoJo Tugler, like you said, I cannot. Obviously, the present team is very exciting. Like, I don't want to fast forward from the present because the present is really cool. The present is a season that you and I and many Cougar fans will be talking about for a long time. But God, this kid's gonna be so good at basketball. At that time, he goes on to be a professional player. Like, just the stuff you're seeing from him. Not just that. I mean, if you just simply looked at this game as the box score and U of H won a close overtime game, you wouldn't see what JoJo Tugler did. You wouldn't see the big offensive rebounds at the right moment, the dunk that is going to live in my head in a positive way for many, many, many years. All that stuff. Like I think that's really cool. And the other, I think, quantifiable way that toughness really bore itself out in Austin is that the Cougars over doubled up the Longhorns on the offensive glass. Kelvin Sampson, I think, said it in the post game that offensive rebounding was really one of the biggest reasons this team won this game, if not the biggest reason. I think, and I'm not going to say we haven't seen this team be a high level offensive rebounding team, but you've seen some teams, I think especially in the Iowa State and TCU losses, you saw those teams maybe get closer to the Cougs than this team is used to seeing from a conference opponent on the offensive glass. And I think in these last two road wins, Monday against the Longhorns, the previous week against BYU, you saw this team win because it was a tougher team, because it came up with the big play at the big moment, and because they won the offensive glass. Like it's Cougar men's basketball right there, if I could ever sum it up simply, Dustin.
Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned the rebounds. That was the next thing I was going to talk about. I was actually I was surprised Houston didn't turn the Longhorns over more in the game than they did in this game. They only got 10 turnovers against the Longhorn team that hasn't taken great care of the ball. But it is damn hard to keep Houston from having a big edge in at least one of turnovers or second chance points. We talk about it so often. And the Cougs got him with the second chance points in this one. They had a 19-8 edge in that category. Again, just going through the game recap, how many of those buckets that we were talking about were like, those were like second and third chances when Houston got the critical buckets that they needed to tie the game up and send it to overtime to win the game in overtime. So I'm just really impressed with what Houston did on the glass there. And yeah, man, just like, I don't know, you talk about JoJo, just one more time to talk about just how many big plays he had in this one. It
feels like everything he did with a counting statistic was a big play almost.
Right. For sure. Yeah, no, I'm not even going to look at the box score because I feel like it's not going to accurately represent just like how many times he made huge, like pivotal plays in this one. And it was funny because the previous game, K-State, again, it was never really close, but nonetheless, I texted you and Bobby about that game. I was like, man, JoJo Tugler is just, again, it was the same thing. He didn't have a huge, crazy line in that game, but just you watch and you go, oh my gosh, that dude has an unbelievable knack for as a freshman already, just like impacting the game in huge moments. And just, with freshmen, you expect that to be one of the last things to come, right? They have the talent, maybe they have the athleticism, but, or do they kind of like shy away in big moments? And that dude, unbelievably talented, unbelievably ready for the college game as a freshman, and absolutely does not shy away in big moments. And someone that, normally maybe you're a little scared to play freshman big minutes during, as you head into like February and March. No, man, I'm very excited that JoJo Tugler is going to be playing, as you said, in the future. Yeah, if he stays 2 more years, maybe, then man, that guy could be an absolute monster, all Big 12 type of player. Not there yet, but already he is someone that you want to have, I think, out there in big moments. And if anyone was a little bit scared about Javier fouling out with 2 minutes to go in overtime, JoJo showed that, he is very much ready to come in and play in those critical moments. So love that from him. Love that Houston will be forever undefeated at the Moody Center. Want to know forever because they'll never schedule us again. And yeah, Houston 6-2 in the Big 12 now stands alone as we speak in first place in the Big 12, half a game ahead of 5-2 Iowa State and Texas Tech, full game ahead of Kansas and TCU at 5-3. So. Yeah, man, pretty good place to be, Sam. 6-2 coming off of a win that exciting and that, clutch. And like I said, you've played all 4 of those road games super close. It feels like you probably should be 2-2 out of those 4, and very, very happy to be 2-2 on the road.
Yeah, exactly. I think certainly we're not saying at 6-2 like, oh, this is a permanent stay at number 1, but to even be here at this point, again, I think this is such a brutally difficult league, and you've seen this team beat some really good opponents in some really difficult situations. Like that's cool. And speaking of brutally difficult situations, even for a program as good as the Houston Cougars, we're going to Phog Allen on Saturday to see the Cougs take on a little known Eastern Kansas program. I believe the Kansas Jayhawks. Jayhawks, is it? We're going to be seeing the Cougs go to, I think, much as I don't want to spend the lead up to playing this opponent that I want badly to see the Cougars win, kissing ass. I mean, one of the places that is definitely a temple of college basketball. The place I've always wanted to see at least one basketball game at. I'm excited to finally do so, along with you and I'm sure many other Cougs making the trip.
Yeah. And again, as longtime listeners of the podcast, even probably short-time listeners of the podcast, probably know that I'm a lifelong Iowa State fan. That's where my family went. So I literally can't remember a time in my life that I wasn't like cheering against Kansas men's basketball. But nonetheless, just over the moon about the chance to see a game at Phog Allen. I mean, it is truly a chance to play in one of the absolute top tier venues in all of college basketball and all of college sports, both in terms of its history and also the game day atmosphere being what it is there. Just couldn't be more excited. As a kind of a quick aside, one of the many reasons I'm excited or happy that we beat the Longhorns on Monday is that means you can't go worse than 1-1 in these 2 back-to-back road games. Which if you had told me beforehand you're going to go 1-1, I go, yeah, I'd probably take that.
Same.
That's a pretty strong result. So, that means you're going into this game. You're the newbie in the Big 12 versus just the absolute ultimate, entrenched power in the Big 12. You're supposed to be the new team, supposed to have the steep learning curve. You're in first place. You're a game up. You're headed to Phog Allen. So you're playing. I mean, Houston is playing with absolute house money on Saturday, and they're playing with a full 4 days of rest after having to play that early Monday game this week. So, I really hope that this is just kind of a really loose, fun, Houston team on Saturday that is going out there with nothing to lose. But just gonna be so much fun.
Yeah, notoriously difficult place to win at, Allen Fieldhouse, and I think any of the not new Big 12 fan bases will tell you the Jayhawks get something like a favorable whistle at home. You heard about this, Dustin?
That's the first time hearing of it.
But I mean, not saying I've reviewed years and years of officiating data, but I will just say Kansas was very fortunate to beat TCU in their conference opener thanks to a couple calls now. And this is, I would say, Dustin, both a flawed Kansas team relative to, I think, the very, very, very high standard of that program's basketball, but also still a very good, and obviously to this point, the toughest road environment the Cougs will have played in this conference by a good margin. With all respect to BYU, with all respect to Hilton Coliseum, which I would say are very much in that top tier of really good, really loud college venues, which I don't hate that the Cougars got those 2 places in the run-up to here. Again, still a notoriously difficult place to win. I guess I'll start with the most obvious flaw with this team, though, and this is why I don't think any Kansas fan would disagree with me on this. Is an extremely dependent on its starting lineup kind of team, and one of the weakest benches in the country. The Jayhawks are 346th nationally in percentage of bench minutes. They don't have anyone who's been a consistent contributor or really anything close to it off the bench this year. They have a couple of freshmen who have shown flashes and have each of them bounced between the bench and the lineup, Marco Jackson, Johnny Furphy, but neither's been too consistent, though I think we'll get to him in a second. I think Furphy's been a nice revelation to them recently, and not that inconsistent play from freshmen is unusual. Furphy, I just mentioned, has been in the Jayhawks starting lineup the last 6 games, has scored in double digits in 5 of those, including a 23-point board effort against Cincinnati, an opponent who themselves has a lot of size in their front court. I think if he can score in double digits on a not terrible shooting percentage against the Cougs, I think that'll make winning this one difficult. Obviously, not the first guy I would necessarily talk about in terms of who have been consistent contributors this year, but Dustin, I really do feel like he's the X factor. If he has a better than decent game on Saturday, I don't know if the Cougs win this one. I think he'll be, kind of a litmus test. What's the like a weather, some kind of indicator of how this one's going for the Cougars. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree with you because they're probably not going to get much of the bench, and that you're not going to completely shut down their two stars in Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dickinson, the wing and the forward respectively. Those are kind of their two bell cows this whole year, as we're just using all kinds of bell analogies here. McCullough, fifth-year guy out on the wing, first 3 years with Texas Tech, last two with the Jayhawks, and has really expanded his offensive game impressively this year after scoring 10 point something points per game for 3 straight years. He's just a hair under 20 points a game this year. Notably, he kind of had back-to-back bad shooting nights against Cincinnati and Iowa State recently before being held out of their most recent game against Oklahoma State due to what Bill Self termed a bone bruise. Self said he would have likely played had it been, the end of the year, but
Had it been somebody who didn't,
had it been someone who wasn't Oklahoma State at home, they might have played him, but no sense risking him for that one. That was me editorializing. Bill Self didn't say that. He was a little
he's an Oklahoma guy, so maybe he didn't want to just absolutely say like, yeah, I could have rested Kevin McCullough and not worried about beating your bad basketball team.
Self did say McCullough that will be back against Houston, but like I said, the last couple of games he did play, he didn't necessarily look 100%. So, forgetting 80% versus 90% versus 100% Kevin McCullough, that could be a big difference. And I think that could be an X factor in this one as well, because like you said, they do heavily depend on him and then Hunter Dickinson, who you probably know from his time at Michigan and being kind of the single biggest deal transfer portal move of the off season. Just big dude, 7 foot plus, large bodied as well, highly efficient inside scorer, can stroke it from outside if you leave him alone out there as well, though. Big time rebounder. Not as good of a shot blocker as you might think for someone his size, but still someone who can alter shots. Interestingly, he's drawing the fewest fouls per game of his career this year, just 3.5, which is excellent news. Long may it last, at least another week or so here. Because he's a good free throw shooter for his size as well. So definitely not someone you want to send to the line a whole bunch, because he's going to get points from the field if you start fouling him a bunch, and he's going to get 7 or 8 points from the line as well. All of a sudden, he's someone who can just have a huge game against you real quick. So obviously Houston's a team that's real fun to watch play defense, especially the way that they just trap the heck out of people in the post. But and especially in recent games, I feel like we've seen a lot of teams doing a lot of taking advantage of the fact that Houston switches on everything and getting, some of Houston's guards against some of their bigs. That's going to be a challenge here. If you get one of your guards rotated to Hunter Dickinson, that can turn into a problem real quick. So definitely a guy who's right at the top of the scouting report. So yeah, I think kind of like you said, the challenge is just keep those guys contained, keep Dickinson and McCullough contained. Don't let them completely take over the game. And then, you got to do a good enough job against their second level scores like Furphy and the guys like you said to keep them under control, because this is one of the most efficient shooting teams in the country. They're going to be shooting at their home baskets. So certainly one of the toughest tests yet for this Cougar defense. And really excited to see this Kansas offense versus Houston defense matchup on Saturday.
Yeah, that's a really good strength on strength right there. We'll mention KU's multi-year starter at point guard, DeJuan Harris, who really I think is the engine of that team. If I agree with you that McCullough and Dickinson would be their two go-to guys on offense, two star players. And McCullough, I would also say, has been a good kind of second option at point guard, or at least a secondary ball handler. I mean, that's what this team that's incredibly skilled. I think it makes him even more of a nightmare to guard, is that you have a couple different guys, that it's not just you could take away DeJuan Harris, that McCullough and even Hunter Dickinson are I think above average passers, above average creators for the median guy who plays their position. And I think that Jamal Shead and Harris matchup is going to be a really, really good one. I wouldn't put more than a handful of point guards in the country in the same category as Jamal Shead, but I feel like Harris is absolutely one of those dudes. I would say KU relies on Harris maybe less to call his number offensively than UH does with Shead, but I mean, that's also a function of having Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dickinson, like I said. And also going to mention KJ Adams, like McCullough, a Texas high school product, super senior, junior. I was thinking getting him and McCullough scrambled there. A guy who's doesn't have the outside shot that McCullough has, so I think defending him that way is different, but still a guy who's able to score inside the arc as well. Again, really, depending on how much Furphy develops, I mean, that's potentially 5 guys who are in some degree high-level scorers, or in Adams' case, more of a high-level creator on the floor. I will say, looking at them as a team, a very good offensive team, like you said, top 40 in both 2-point, 3-point field goal percentage, good free throw shooting team. Not great getting to the line. You point out Dickinson hasn't been for relative to his career. not as great at drawing fouls, though I'll believe the Jayhawks don't have a big free throw edge at Phog Allen the precise moment I see it. I mean, not amazing at taking care of the ball for a team that has like a veteran point guard like Adams. I think if U of H can take this one on the road, it'll be the Cougars taking advantage of maybe some KU sloppiness there. Not a great offensive rebounding team for as good as Dickinson is individually there. I mean, I think that also speaks to the fact that there isn't really another true big man on this roster other than Dickinson that you'd be, if you're a KU fan, comfortable seeing a lot of minutes. And I'll be curious to see. They generally like to play the game at a quicker tempo than the Cougs. Not a super active team defensively either. I mean, not bad, but I think definitionally middle of the pack in Division I in opponent turnover percentage. I think very good at preventing opponents from making shots inside the arc, which I mean makes sense given the length, given that they have, you know, at any one time usually 4 guys listed 6'7" or taller on the court to throw at you, and this isn't the tallest U of H team. Not as good at defending the perimeter, and I think U of H will need something like they did at BYU. I mean, wasn't as good, I think, for the entirety of the game in Austin, but you definitely did get the clutch threes. You're going to at least need, I think, the clutch threes to win this one. And on the balance this year, the Jayhawks have been very good defending without fouling. So, again, can't imagine the game being played in Lawrence will hurt in that area. I mean, bottom line, certainly a scenario where that any margin of win is notable and also welcome, but, you know, not a crisis if this team can't win on Saturday, because in the last 4 seasons, I'll look this up, Dustin, how many times do you think Kansas has lost at home since the COVID season, the 2020-21 season?
So
if you looked it up?
I did look it up. I actually looked up their last 5. They haven't lost at home this year, and then their last 5 seasons they've lost 1-1, 1-0 home games.
Good Lord.
Good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. Tough team to beat.
Yeah, tough team to beat because they're real good. Tough team to beat because they mysteriously always do seem to get the whistles when they play at home in Allen Fieldhouse. But yeah, you kind of mentioned it. I think my key is, you know, you look at this team, they're an anti-chaos rebounding team. We talk about chaos rebounding teams. They're an anti-chaos rebounding team in that they don't really crash the offensive glass that hard, but they don't give up that many offensive rebounds either. And, you know, that's probably, you know, so if it kind of plays out that way where neither team does a whole lot on the offensive glass, if they're able to kind of keep Houston contained that way. You know, like I said, they're a more efficient shooting team than Houston. They're probably going to get more free throws than Houston will. So, you know, if Houston wants to get those extra possessions like they usually do, kind of like you said, I think turnovers is the way to, you know, you won the UT game with rebounds. I think you maybe want to flip the switch and make this a turnovers game. Their numbers are pretty mediocre, both in terms of, you know, holding on to the ball and in terms of forcing turnovers on the other end. You know, like I said, we saw a surprisingly few number of turnovers against the Longhorns. So I kind of also said that against that they're kind of a mediocre team in terms of keeping hold of the ball. So hoping to see hoping to see Houston, like I said, get that turnover edge, because yeah, I mean, you gotta kind of have everything go your way, as the fact that they're losing less than 1 home game a year over the last 5 years tells you. You got to kind of have everything go your way if you're going to win at Allen Fieldhouse. You got to probably have a plus turnover margin. You probably got to hit a few more threes than you normally would, and just hope that that not everything is clicking for them. Maybe hope that McCullough is not quite at 100%. So, yeah, tough test. But like I said, I'm unbelievably excited about Houston getting a chance to go pick up a marquee win, knowing that there's no real downside, because, you know, at Kansas is probably one of the games that you maybe mentally pencil in as not one of your highest chances of winning the game. Game's at the beginning of the year, so really, you know, very little downside to losing this game, and all kinds of upside if you win. So excited to see again, Houston being the program that it is now doesn't have very many just kind of like playing with house money games, right? You have a lot of like bullseye on your back, like you're the favorite, like try not to like blow this games.
Yeah, 'cause this team was still a betting favorite in the win at BYU and the win in Austin on Monday.
Yeah. So I don't know that they've been. I think they've been the betting favorite in every game this year, I believe, according to Vegas. I know Ken Palm has Houston favored by like 5. We'll see what the Vegas line is when this game starts. But yeah, I mean, regardless of what the number is, I think you're always kind of spiritually the underdog when you go play at Allen Fieldhouse. So yeah, any win would be great, and you know, you're going to spend exactly 0 tears worrying about a potential loss. So,
like you said, house money.
What happens? Yeah, house money, exactly. A game that will not be a house money game for Houston will be their following game when they host Oklahoma State. There aren't many games in the Big 12 season where you would say, not only does this need to be a win, this needs to be a win by a healthy margin. This is one of those games. The Cowboys 1-7 in Big 12 play after a non-conference campaign that included 0 notable wins and losses to Abilene Christian, Southern Illinois, and a very bad Notre Dame team. Their one Big 12 win was a narrow home win over West Virginia. Probably there haven't been very many blowouts across the conference, but OSU has lost by 17 plus points to Texas Tech, Iowa State, and Kansas twice. Other than the home blowout at the hands of the Jayhawks, their other 3 home games have been pretty close. So I think if Houston caught them in Stillwater this year, yeah, certainly that's the road game you expect to win. But I would have a little bit of pause before just like kind of papering over this one the way that I feel like maybe I'm papering over this one. Might temper my expectations a little bit. But at Houston, no, this should be a big win. Oklahoma State doesn't take care of the ball. They don't get to the line a bunch. They don't block shots or force turnovers. They don't do anything super well. They got a bunch of guys that, have the green light from deep. They do shoot a ton of threes. They shoot a decent percentage from 3. So I think if you're trying to craft the narrative of how this game could end up being close, I think it's a combination of, Oklahoma State going unconscious from beyond the arc and Houston just having the biggest hangover ever after playing at Kansas in their previous game. But even taking those things into account, Sam, it's hard to envision both of those things lasting long enough, over an entire game for this one to really be close.
Yeah, it would have to be something like, I guess, Javon Small doing a Tyler Harris last year at the Fertitta Center impression, which I hope I'm not speaking to existence there. I guess I understand the balance why Oklahoma State is rated just a little bit higher than West Virginia. And to their credit, like you said, they won the head-to-head last weekend in the Stillwater. I would still say that West Virginia, with their current roster, is a slightly better team than Oklahoma State, who didn't, like you say, pick up that first conference win until this past weekend. And in recent history, they've had a number of tricky, very good defensive teams that were maybe just below the bar of NCAA tournament caliber. I mean, usually those teams were also not very good at putting the ball in the basket, but you could count on them being tough, rugged defensive teams that you certainly didn't want to play in Stillwater. And that's just not the case this year, not even close, unfortunately, for Oklahoma State fans. They're just inside the top 100 in defensive efficiency, but I mean, compare that to the last 3 seasons when they were comfortably inside the top 20 in that same statistic. And even though this is probably their best team at putting the ball in the basket since the Cade Cunningham one-year team, they're so bad at every other aspect of offense, taking care of the basketball, getting offensive rebounds, drawing fouls, that they actually are rated worse offensively than their last couple of teams, which were both outside the national top 100. Both were not good offensive teams by any quantitative or qualitative metric. And yeah, they're fine at putting the ball in the basket. And like I said, pretty bad at everything else you would measure offensive performance on, like Javon Small, another JS guard in this conference, not nearly as good as Jamal Shed, but I would say has definitely been a bright spot for them. Came over from East Carolina, has been their point guard, and I would say go-to guy offensively. They have a couple of promising freshmen, I will say. Eric Daly, promising freshman, big man, a 4-star recruit who looks like he's taken nicely to the college game, probably being asked to do a bit too much, but at least looks like he's living up to the recruiting pedigree. And also Brandon Garrison, who is the top Oklahoma high school recruit, has shown some promise, is top 100 nationally in block percentage, but not really much else worth noting individually from this team. I mean, I think both of us really have probably said more than we need to truly say on Oklahoma State. They're a bad Big 12 team, and U of H will probably win by some comfortable margin at home against them. I don't know, Dustin, as someone whose prime years falling in love with the sport were kind of the late 90s, early aughts, it makes me sad to see them struggle like this. I mean, I associate this team with their longtime head coach, Eddie Sutton, guys like Tony Allen, John Lucas III, Ivan McFarland. You want to go a little more recently, Marcus Smart about 10 years ago. I mean, I hear Oklahoma State basketball and I associate with really, really good teams. And I guess maybe someone, as a U of H fan through the lean years, I sympathize with the program with a lot of really great history that seems to be kind of in a weird wilderness where they've figured out how to do the things that made them a good basketball program. I think I asked him a couple different times, our friend in 1012 Network Honcho, Philip, it feels like a problem that goes beyond their current head coach, Mike Boynton. And I think whether or not Oklahoma State institutionally is willing to do what it takes to be a competitive men's basketball program, I think needs to be fixed in addition to probably a coaching change, but it seems like the issues run deeper there.
No, I'm with you. Like same as someone who's been watching Big 12 basketball, kind of like I said, my whole life. You knew that Oklahoma State team was always it was tricky, especially in Gallagher-Iba Arena. Yeah, it is. I'm right there with you. It's kind of a bummer to see them struggling this much. I will say, is this a worse Oklahoma State team than Temple was last year? I don't know that they are. And, Temple came into your building and beat you. So, I guess have a little bit of humility about these things. You never know how college sports are going to go. But this one seems very, very highly likely.
If this was in Stillwater, and I know Temple wouldn't be, like, if this was in Stillwater, I would just be like, hey, crazy things happen in the Big 12. Dustin, they have not been competitive in a single Big 12 road game this year. I'm not talking about even winning. Like, they've been competitive against some good teams at home, even as a not good team. They have not competed on the road against anybody. Not just throwing Kansas against them, because that's a hard team to beat, even if you're having a decent season at their place. But man, just didn't compete against Kansas. I think lost pretty bad to, what was it, K-State? Hold on. I'm definitely not pulling up.
They lost by 4 to K-State, and that was like because K-State rallied to beat them. So they were.
Yeah, that was in Stillwater. Yeah, in Stillwater.
That was in Manhattan.
Was it?
Yes.
God, I even watched that one too. Memory's really going on me, Dustin.
They've had one competitive road game. No, it is. They've had one competitive road game, which they still blew at the end and lost. And the other 3, they've gotten the doors absolutely blown off of them. And Houston, like we said, has blown out every team that is in the Big 12 that has come, every time period that has come into the Fertitta Center this year. So, yeah, again, my 99% certain this is a big Cougar victory. Yes, but I think this is a better Houston team than the one that lost to Temple last year. So, I think it would take an awful lot for this game to be even close. But who knows? I guess is all I'll throw out there.
That's true.
But yeah, it's telling that the best argument you can make for Oklahoma State being close is who knows, and maybe it's a hangover from the KU game. Anyway, let's move it along. Keep it going with some Cougar women's basketball, who split a couple of games since our last episode. And it's funny, Sam. They lost to the team that was winless in Big 12 play, and then they beat the team that had a win in Big 12 play. Almost like if you would listen to our episode last week, you might have projected that to happen based on the things we said. But no, open the week with a loss in Orlando to UCF in overtime. Final score of 92-87. The Cougars started out strong in this one, Sam. Led 25-17 after the first quarter, but after holding the Knights to 3 of 14 shooting in that quarter, they shot over 50% the rest of the way. And oh man, the fouls in this one. Layla Blair, just 24 minutes of game action before fouling out. Peyton McFarland, 13 minutes of game action before fouling out. Cameron Jones, 9 minutes of game action before fouling out. Jasira Diawara fouled out in 16 minutes off the bench. Good grief. That's again, UCF probably a little bit of a better team than Cincinnati, but not a good team. Losing to them is hurts, and especially just seeing player after player after player get taken out of this one.
Yeah, I mean, not the worst case scenario. I mean, we talked about it in the preview. UCF looked like they were playing, I think, better basketball than the Cougs were recently, and this team has played especially not good on the road. But I don't know, man. Losing to an opponent who came into the game with 0 Big 12 wins doesn't feel great. I mean, another game, not the first thing we've seen this year, where the Cougs started strong, kind of like you talked about, but couldn't sustain that early effort well enough in the final 3 quarters, plus the overtime in this case, to get what I think would have been a big mood-changing win. I mean, it doesn't fix all the problems, but right now, Dustin, it would feel pretty decent to be 4-6 in the league play. I wouldn't be throwing a parade in the streets, but 4-6 in League 12 play, at least, I'd say a couple more winnable games remaining on the schedule. Our goals are pretty modest. Being on pace to win around 6 Big 12 games this program wouldn't have been terrible, even if all 3 co-hosts present. I think if we were all here and I think express the bigger picture concerns we have, I think, with this program. I mean, heck of a start. Cougs shot over 40%. Were perfect from the charity stripe, but more importantly, I think really held the Knights in check early on. Really looking at the bigger picture, though, I mean, couldn't sustain that defensive effort, obviously. Knights shot 40% or better in all remaining quarters plus the OT, shot 50% or better in the second, fourth, and OT. Interior defense continues to be a big problem for this team. Dustin, UCF was 25 of 48 inside the arc, and man, unless you're turning an opponent over like crazy, that's going to make winning a game on the road extremely hard. And it's not an experience issue. I mean, every U of H frontcourt player who gets regular minutes is in at least their 3rd college season. A lot of them are 4th and 5th year players. UCF's freshman post player, this was, I think, everything that really frustrated me when I dug on this game. Kayla Ngadu had 12 boards and 25 points playing against a bunch of players who are 3 or 4 years older than her. Like, I think that's a symptom of something really being wrong here. I think I'll give the Cougars credit a lot of good stuff happened offensively in this one. Nia Boyd had 19 points on 6 of 14 shooting, was near perfect on her free throws. Kiera Merchant also had 14 points in 17 minutes off the bench. And I realize freshmen can be up and down, and the staff certainly knows the players better than we do, but I also have a hard time understanding why Merchant's minutes have been so up and down this year. I mean, it's frustrating. It feels like the team has been close in some games this year and it hasn't been able to close them out, and I think this is just our most recent example here.
Yeah, like you said, definitely tough to be losing to teams in the bottom of the conference, but it's not like you're doing a rebuilding season because you've got actually a pretty veteran squad like Houston does. They did follow that up with a win over Cincinnati, another one of the teams at the bottom of the Big 12 standings, a 54-46 home victory for the Cougars. And after the game with few stops came the game with few buckets. But the way things are going, I think any win is a good one. You'll take any win at this point. And yeah, the Houston really did it the turnover heavy way. I don't know the last time I've seen a team get this close to scoring half of their points off of turnovers. Houston, 23 of 54 points in this one came off of Bearcat turnovers. And yeah, game high 15 from Layla Blair. Nia Boyd kind of came surprisingly close to a triple-double with 11 points, 8 boards, 6 assists in this one. So, I don't know. I'm of two minds here. At one point, I was going to be like, nice, we won. We had a couple of players that played well. And I'm trying not to be too critical because it's like, oh, yeah, it's a win. And I'm happy to have a win. And I'm glad to be talking about a win. But there is kind of that specter of just like, okay, this is ultimately an 8-point home win over a pretty bad team. There's only so much you can take away from this.
I will say 8-point win, but one where you didn't trail in the second half and really cumulatively for the game didn't trail for much of the proceedings. And not to be too self-congratulatory, but when we talked about this game in the preview, it did really look like a low-scoring game. It's a game the Cougars have been kind of willing to play this year at times, but I remember Katrina Merriweather, their Cincy's head coach, when she was at Memphis, really liked to play that specific style. Really kind of felt like when we played Memphis in that conference and that the game was played in the 40s and 50s. I mean, again, I share your just like, I can't get too wild over an 8-point win over one of the worst Big 12 teams, while at the same time just being like, okay, but we could be talking about this team being 2-8 and having lost to Cincy. Like, it's not, and I just would love more than anything to finish this entire athletics year and not have a team, because right now we're in position, we have not done so yet, to basically not have a team be dead last in the standings. So I'd love to go the entire season. I know it's a modest goal. I know it's like no one's going to raise any banners for we weren't dead last in the standings in any sport, but I would feel genuinely good making a big leap in terms of athletic competition for a lot of our sports, some of which weren't necessarily blowing the doors off the AAC, and to still be competitive enough to not be dead last. I mean, again, modest goal, but still be happy to achieve it at the end of the year. And I think at least the most depressing goal, this win gets you closer to that.
All right, Sam. Well, in terms of depressingly modest goals, after Houston lost by 29 points in Waco to Baylor, they will be hosting the Bears on Sunday afternoon in the Fertitta Center. What's our modest goal for this one? Because I know it's not Houston winning this game.
Keep it within 20. That's mine.
That seems
maybe be competitive. Maybe like be competitive at halftime too.
Yeah, keep it within single digits at halftime, or at least at the first quarter.
I mean, they've cooled off relatively. Baylor has relative to the early season performance, so maybe possible. But yeah, like you not expecting a win here.
All right, I don't think we need to do too much more on that, especially as we got 3 more sports to get to. So let's go ahead and keep it moving with track and field, which hosted the Robert Platt Invitational this past weekend, competing against athletes from schools like Southern Miss, Louisiana Tech, and a number of the smaller Texas schools. And I got some deeper notes on this one, Sam, but I know the highlight from this one that you want to talk about is Grant Levesque really introducing himself.
Really got an incredible performance, a school record-setting performance as well. I mean, I thought this was a really cool aspect of it. Obviously, it's a multi-event thing, but one of those events is the 60 hurdles. Grant Levesque ran one of the fastest 10 times in U of H track program history in the 60 hurdles. Not fastest like heptathletes running the 60 hurdles, like fastest in a program with a just incredible history of sprinters and hurdlers. To have Grant Levesque be within shouting distance of Cavell Jordan, an All-American hurdler, somebody we've talked about a lot on the show, Cougar alumnus, I think really incredible. And again, we're in late January. Like we are not the point of the season that is like the peak performance part of the season. Like this is a guy who could have better performances, like I think the coming year. Like I think that was really cool as well. Also had personal bests in the 60 meters and the 1,000 meters as well. I just like we talked about in our indoor season preview. It's always fun to see Cougar track and field athletes succeeding in new events, or I guess in this case, new multi events that we haven't been able to follow as closely just because the program hasn't had maybe a consistently high level athlete competing there. And I am as positive as I am positive about anything in the show that this won't be the last time that you, me, and Bobby, or some combination of us three, talks about Grant Levesque doing something unbelievably cool and noteworthy in a multi-event in this season or the outdoor season as well.
Absolutely. And certainly some other interesting marks put up by some Cougar athletes at the Robert Platt Invitational. And kind of like you said, it's really early in indoor season. It's all about ramping up to put up a big performance at, Big 12 championships at the end of February, then hopefully nationals in early March. So, it's not really anyone trying to go out, and you're not likely to see too many personal bests be set in late January. And certainly, you take some of the national rankings at this point with several grains of salt, knowing that there are athletes that haven't put up times in certain events or are going to still, ramp up. But I think nonetheless, it is still, with that said about how silly it is to look at national rankings, let's do that anyway, because it's fun. And it just kind of tells you, hey, some of these people are having some impressive performances. And we saw a bunch of those, especially on the women's side in this event. And certainly I think the men's side has been, the stronger of the two programs, but was excited to see some of the women's performances in this one. Senior Kellyanne Beckford finished the 800 meters in 2 minutes, 4.59 seconds. Still a couple of seconds off of her personal best, but that's good for 16th in the country this year, which, which is indoors just goes straight top 16, go to nationals. So that's if the season ended today, would be going to nationals kind of performance. Junior hurdler Miracle Thompson put up a top 20 national mark in the 60 hurdles. Michaela Mouton, just a freshman, finished the 400 meters with a time of 53.21 seconds. That's number 25 in the country at present. And then on the men's side, in addition to Levesque, another big exciting graduate transfer we got this year was South Florida transfer David Ajama, who we highlighted in our season preview. He had a triple jump of 51 feet, 3.5 inches, which is, a good foot plus off of his personal best. So again, that's not a mark that's going to be his best mark at the end of the indoor season, hopefully. But it's still top 25 nationally at the current moment, which kind of gives you an idea that this is someone who I think is a serious candidate to qualify for nationals in the coming weeks here. So yeah, not taking too much from it, but I think nonetheless, even knowing that this is kind of a grain of salt, only a stepping stone to your eventual top performances for the year, I think still some encouraging efforts from the Cougars this past weekend.
Yeah, just a reminder, in Njama's case too, that a reminder, this guy isn't even at his peak yet, and he's still going to be one of the very best in his event in the country.
So Houston will be back in College Station for the second time this indoor season this coming weekend, where they will be competing at the Charlie Thomas Invitational. Sticking with the Olympic sports, Cougar swimming and diving had a dual meet against Miami of Florida and Rice. They ended up coming in narrowly behind the Hurricanes and blowing out the Owls. Quick reminder, dual meet for swimming just means that Houston, Miami of Florida, and Rice were all competing, and then based on the results, you get head-to-head scores against each of the other two teams. And your standard kind of most points for first place, fewer points for each descending respective position on down. And interestingly, Houston competed against both of these schools individually. They had a one-on-one meet against Miami and a one-on-one meet against Rice last year before competing against them both at the same time this year. And last year, Houston got blown out by Miami 187 to 108, and they lost to Rice as well, 159-135 before, of course, getting revenge, beating Rice and the rest of the AAC for their conference title. And then this year, the scores got much better. Houston did still lose to Miami, but by a much closer margin of 165-129. And they clobbered Rice by a score of 203-91, emphatically outperforming the Cougs in this one. Had 5 different athletes win an event so giving Houston 6 total wins out of the 17 events, so not bad at all. Eden Humphrey won the 1650 freestyle with an NCAA B cut time. Henrietta Fangley won the 100-yard breaststroke. Didn't quite improve on her already established B cut for the event this year. Same story with Alondra Ortiz, who won the 200 butterfly, also fractionally off of her already established B cut time for the year. We saw Audrey McKinnon win the 200-yard breaststroke, and then on the boards. Hedda Grels won both the 1 and 3 meter springboard events. So, good to see the Cougs put up some solid times here, some solid marks. And like I said, getting a pretty respectable performance against a team that beat them, comfortably last year, even when what was a conference championship Houston team.
Yeah, I mean, that's the strength of this team, is that they've been so young the last couple of years, but I think you also, maybe Ryan Walker-Merck and his staff spoiled us in that regard. You expect some progress year on year, but I mean, definitely seeing it here. And I think two good benchmarks in the two opponents that you competed against last time out.
For sure. And then finally, we saw Cougar tennis beat Louisiana Lafayette to open their season by a 4-3 score. The Cougs coming into this one were 4-0 all time against the Raging Cajuns, including a 4-1 win last year that would have likely finished 5-2 if they'd played all the matches out. So for this one to be 4-3, similar result, 1 point shifting towards Ooh La La. Doubles point in this one went to Houston, and narrowly so. The first doubles set to finish was actually won by ULL. Sophie Schoten and Sonia Kovalenko, however, picked up a big 7-5 doubles win to tie it up. And then Gabriela Cortez and Blanca Cortijo Pereño finished it off for Houston to get the doubles point with a 6-4 victory. And that ended up being the deciding point, because as you can probably infer from the fact that I told you that the final score was 4-3 Houston, the 6 singles matches were split 3-3. It does look like the Raging Cajuns, I think, tried to game the singles system a little bit, putting what I'm guessing is not one of their strongest singles players in the number 1 spot against Laura Slishon. And Slishon won that one 6-1, 6-1. Cortijo Pereño also had an overmatched opponent in the 6th spot. She won that one 6-2 to 6-1. So with those ending quickly, Houston had a 3-0 lead and looked like it was going to be fairly comfortable, but the Raging Cajuns did take the next singles match to finish, pulling within 3-1. But Schoten, after needing tiebreakers to win her first set, won the second set by a comfortable 6-2 margin, which clinched the match for the Cougars. So, maybe a little bit more, nail biting than you wanted it against Louisiana Lafayette, but nonetheless ends up going Houston's way 4-3 for a season opening victory.
Yeah, I think I almost feel like I kind of jinxed it, because I really talked up Slishon and Jimashkevich as your top doubles pairing, and they ended up being the one doubles pairing that lost. Though, like you pointed out, Slishon did quite well in her specific singles head-to-head. I mean, not, I think, anything really worth taking away from a one match sample size. Maybe a little nervous that, oh hey, like the margin was slightly closer this year, and you're facing them at home versus facing them on the road last year. But also I feel like when we've talked about this team has had some early clunkers where they lost. I think it was like UTSA one year as Elon, I remember for sure, in the last like 3 or 4 seasons. So it's this team's first time out competitively in the spring. If this was kind of if this was maybe a not 100% of your best effort, better now than later when you face some tougher opponents.
Yeah, and Houston will get a really kind of very similar test, I think, on Sunday morning in their next match, when they will be in Denton to face the Mean Green of the University of North Texas. This is a Mean Green team that Houston has played each of the past 3 seasons and has beaten them 4-1, 4-3, 5-1. So another opponent that, just like ULL, you've played a bunch recently. You tend to beat them, but not in like a dramatic sweep. So we'll see if that means another narrow Cougar victory or something a little bit better or a little bit worse than that.
Yep.
All right, that's going to be it for us. So out of here like a tiny, just over an hour.
Look at that efficiency.
Efficiency, not usually the name of the game of the Scott Holman podcast, but we'll take it where we can get it. We also will certainly take what we can get in terms of support from our podcast patrons, who we are tremendously appreciative to. We are fully very aware of the fact that the vast majority of people that listen to podcasts that are freely available just listen to them for free and don't choose to put some money behind it. So the fact that we've got a bunch of y'all that are doing that means the world to us. So thank you very much. If you do enjoy this podcast on a regular basis and you feel like $5 a month isn't a ridiculous amount to put behind the work that we do, we would love for you to go to patreon.com/shpodcast, where you can sign up to do that, get the good karma for helping us out, and then also get some bonus content that we're putting out there as well. Love hearing from you, the listener. You can email us shpodcast@gmail.com or tweet at us at shpodcast. Or, I was really excited to come tell you that I had posted on Blue Sky, because I did it like every day for like 4 or 5 days in a row. I'm falling a little bit back off the train, but we're making it happen little by little, folks. at podcast.bsky.social. Be sure to follow us over there as well.
Guarantee we'll be more active there in the Facebook. That's the podcast guarantee.
The podcast, yes, absolutely. It'll probably be a distant second to Twitter for the time being, but definitely going to be coming comfortably ahead of Facebook, where we have a page but don't post, and Instagram, where I don't know that we even have an account. I think we maybe started one at one point and never posted on it. I don't know. It's a mystery. Yes. It's unknowable. But either way, if you made it all the way to this rambling end of the podcast, good for you. And as always,
go Cougs.
Go Cougs.
Vamos los Cougs.
Go Cougs.
Go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs. Let's go.